Located approximately 70 miles west of Washington, D.C., lies the northern Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. Front Royal and Warren County are probably best known for the magnificent displays of fall foliage offered by the Blue Ridge Mountains, and for being the canoe capital of Virginia thanks to the mighty Shenandoah River. Here, the North and South Forks combine and flow north for nearly 60 miles before feeding into the Potomac River. Legend has it that in 1670, John Lederer was the first explorer to set eyes on this part of the Shenandoah Valley, referring to it as the frontier. With the Shenandoah River running through it, the plentiful wildlife, the luscious wilderness, and the lofty peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains, pioneers moving westward described it as the Garden of Eden. The first settlers of this area of the valley were Germans, Scots-Irish, and English Quakers. In 1731, a Scottish Quaker named Robert Mackay became the first settler of what is now known as Warren County. The territory of Warren was originally owned by Lord Fairfax, who had large portions of it surveyed and laid out into manors. By 1836, Warren County was formed from the adjoining counties of Shenandoah to the west and Frederick to the northwest, and is named for General Joseph Warren, the Revolutionary patriot who sent Paul Revere on his famous midnight ride and was the first officer killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Our community, Front Royal, Virginia, and Warren County has a rich history, especially the part it played in the Civil War. We invite you to learn more by visiting our Visitor Center at 414 East Main Street and by patronizing the Warren Heritage Society located at 101 Chester Street. Our community has much to offer: civic organizations, natural attractions, shopping, fine and casual dining, services, and local quality of living. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this presentation in the comfort of your own surroundings. Whether you're a native, a new resident, a passerby, or prospective resident or tourist, we hope you appreciate what our community has to offer, and we hope to see you in our community on Main Street, at one of our annual festivals, or shopping one of our fine establishments very soon. The story of our community begins nearly 11,000 years ago. One of the most extensive and intensively tested Paleo-Indian sites in North America is in Warren County. Thunderbird Archaeological Site contains post molds, offering evidence of perhaps the oldest structure on the continent. After the last ice age came to an end, the food supply of early Paleo-Indians increased and became more stable. And with milder weather, more animals and plants survived. Thus, these semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers found themselves along the banks of the South Fork of the Shenandoah River in what is now Warren County. These earliest settlers were what we call a Stone Age people. The site was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1977. While the site is no longer open to the public, many artifacts survive and can be found on display. A portion of the original site is now owned by the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. The Raymond R. Andy Guest State Park is situated on this same stretch of the Shenandoah River. It was more than 60 years after the English settlement at Jamestown before the first Europeans set eyes on the Shenandoah Valley. While it is believed that some trappers and fur traders had ventured into the western mountains of Virginia, John Lederer, a German doctor, was the first to officially explore and map the Royal Front. From 1669 through 1670, Lederer wrote in Latin an account of his 3 expeditions, thus paving the way for others to further explore, map, and eventually settle in the Blue Ridge Mountains. By the early 1700s, settlers began arriving and building in the areas of Glen Echo, Lymeton, and Cedarville. A Scottish Quaker named Robert Mackay built our community's oldest standing structure in 1732. Taking advantage of these early trade routes, Captain Thomas Chester obtained a license to run a ferry across the Shenandoah River in 1736. Early maps labeled the area Chester, and Front Royal's oldest street and Happy Creek Gap both still bear his name. Future Revolutionary War general and lawmaker William Russell owned a 20,000-acre land grant on which a horse track was built to entertain many of the new settlers and early frontiersmen. In 1742, Peter LeHue first visits the future site of Front Royal on a surveying trip of Lord Fairfax's Northern Neck proprietary. Even a young George Washington would survey the area for Lord Fairfax and stay in Robert Ashby's home in Howellsville during one expedition. Through the mid-1700s, other small communities such as Buckton, Bentonville, Reliance, and Overall are settled. Even Lord Thomas Fairfax establishes a home in the Shenandoah Valley called Greenway Court in what is now Clark County. Here he could better manage his land holdings and enjoy his love of fox hunting. By 1754, Peter LeHue had purchased 200 acres of land on either side of the Happy Creek, which will eventually become Front Royal. When Virginia began to muster troops to fight for American independence, many soldiers from the area joined the Reverend Peter Muhlenberg's 8th Virginia Regiment, or Thomas Buck's Minutemen. The community was also a vital supplier of goods from the many farms, mills, and early industries. By 1785, the community starts to take shape. For the first time, the name of Front Royal appears in a deed. Chester Street's oldest surviving structure, the Balthus House, is built around this time, and in 1788, Front Royal is chartered as a town. Over the next decade, growth would continue as James and John Marshall would purchase former Fairfax lands. James eventually settled in what was the finest house in the area at Happy Creek. Bel Air is built by Thomas Buck. Mills, tanneries, and churches begin to dot the landscape. The Front Royal Community Library Society would establish a subscription library in Front Royal, only the second such library in Virginia. Buckton, Browntown, Waterlick, and Nineveh spring up in this period. Over the next 3 decades, more homes and businesses take hold in the area. Rose Hill, Guard Hill, Spengler Hall, and countless churches are built. In 1836, Warren County is carved from parts of Frederick and Shenandoah counties, and a courthouse is constructed. The namesake of the county is General Joseph Warren, who was the first officer killed in the Revolutionary War at the Battle of Bunker Hill, and is also credited with sending Paul Revere on his famous ride. Through the 1840s, the local economy began to grow, and new structures and industries emerged. Front Royal's oldest church, Williams Chapel, is constructed, and grand homes such as Erin and Long Meadow. Among the new industries in our community, wagon manufacturers were the most prosperous. Wagons produced here traversed much of the western and southern landscapes of early America, especially along the Oregon Trail. In 1854, the first railroad crossed the Manassas Gap to enter Front Royal, and covered wooden bridges were constructed across the forks of the Shenandoah. While this vital transportation link helped further boost the local economy, it did start the decline in commercial river traffic. Several small communities such as Freetown and New Dublin would spring up on the edges of Front Royal. In addition, many new schools would open and several doctors begin practicing medicine. By the 1860s, our community found itself on the front lines of America's Civil War. The county was of strategic importance during the war due to its agricultural productivity and vital transportation links. The area changed hands numerous times during the war, and it was here on May 23, 1862, that one of the first battles of General Stonewall Jackson's famous Valley Campaign took place. With the aid of information from the infamous spy Belle Boyd, Jackson overran the Union garrison stationed at Front Royal. During this battle, Confederate troops from Maryland were sent forward to attack the garrison largely defended by Union troops from Maryland, giving a true meaning to the phrase, brother against brother. General Robert E. Lee and part of his forces passed through the community during Lee's Gettysburg campaign, stopping off at Bel Air to survey his troops. To learn more about the part Warren County played in the Civil War, visit Warren Rifles Confederate Museum from mid-April to the end of October. Built on Chester Street in 1959, the museum contains one of the largest displays of personal effects, uniforms, weapons, and battle flags of the period, including Colonel John S. Mosby's spurs, one of Belle Boyd's dresses, Stonewall Jackson's signal cannon, and a letter and button from Robert E. Lee. By the end of the war, much of the county lay in ruins, with most every mill and barn burnt. While starvation conditions existed, the community rebuilt. An Irishman by the name of Samuel Carson started Carson Lime Works at Riverton, one of the largest industries of its kind in the South. Ferry service resumed across the Shenandoah. Wagon manufacturing, mining, and milling soon resumed. Orchards and vineyards were started. Even a cigar company existed. As rail service resumed and new bridges were constructed, growth continued. By 1892, Randolph-Macon Academy was constructed, and the Front Royal and Riverton Improvement Company was formed and purchased and laid out streets for much of Front Royal. Shenandoah Normal College would open in Reliance. The Front Royal Fire Department would be formed. Electricity and telephone service is brought into town. Even tourists from nearby cities begin to discover the beautiful countryside. By the turn of the century, Front Royal and Warren County was a fairly modern community. The second of the community's colleges, Eastern College, was founded in 1900 and stood at the corners of 6th Street and Royal Avenue. In 1901, the U.S. government began to procure land for the Remount Depot. The purchasing process was completed by 1911. The principal function of the remount service was to procure, process, train, and issue horses, mules, and later dogs for military use, and to train personnel in animal management. Through the early 1900s, fires would force the closure of both colleges, and in 1927, Randolph-Macon Academy burns. Sonner Hall would not be built until 1932. In 1935, Town Hall is built, and the following year the Civilian Conservation Corps builds a new courthouse, as well as many other local structures. One major project the CCC worked on is the Shenandoah National Park. William E. Carson of Front Royal was instrumental in making the park a reality. Though the project displaced many families from their homes through blanket condemnation, Carson, by reducing the overall size of the project to just 1/3, spared many more families. After resigning from the Virginia Conservation Commission, Carson donated 68 acres for the construction of the Front Royal Country Club, which was also constructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, the community would continue to grow, with a new high school and community hospital, and new industries such as American Viscose Corporation opening. By 1942, the bridges spanning the river are replaced with new 4-lane concrete bridges. During World War II, our community played host to German prisoners of war at the U.S. Army Remount Station. After the war, the remount depot was obtained by Virginia Polytechnic Institute and the U.S. Department of Agriculture for cattle testing. In 1948, Front Royal got its first radio station, and in 1949, Ben Crosby held the world premiere of his film, Riding High in Front Royal. He also donated nearly half the money for the construction of a baseball stadium. In the early 1950s, passenger rail service to Front Royal would end. Warren Memorial Hospital would be built, and Samuels Public Library would move into Ivy Lodge. In 1958, then Virginia Governor J. Lindsay Almond Jr. would close the Warren County schools as part of the massive resistance movement. The following year, a judge ordered that Warren County schools would reopen on a desegregated basis. Many students, however, continued to attend private schools that residents and parents had organized during the closings. Many classes were held in local churches and other establishments until the